Hello and welcome back to Mr. Traxler's math class. So I've got some things I'm really excited to share with you that we'll go over through these PowerPoints. Now, the big emphasis here is choice and personalization in mathematics class. Okay, so first you're going to have a lot of choice in learning. So how your grading is going to be done is going to be a little flexible based on what you want to do. If you want to do mostly Khan Academy, if you want to throw in some personalized lessons that you have some say in, we can do some of those. We're also going to be making sure that we stick with mastery learning. This is something you've already seen in this class. The idea there is we try to make sure that we do what's right for you. And one of those things is we make sure that you come at least pretty close to mastering something before we throw you into something next that's dependent on that, right? A silly analogy would be trying to throw you onto a unicycle when you're still working on the bicycle. That wouldn't make sense, at least in most people's eyes. Okay, so one thing you've all worked with some already is Khan Academy. So where does choice come in here? Well, you get to choose what topic to work on next, and later we'll see that's actually going to have an effect on what you can be tested on. You can choose how to learn that topic. So let's say you decide you're going to click on solving linear equations as your next topic. And you haven't done that before. Well, you've got options. So you can flag me down. You can say, Mr. Traxler, I would like some one-on-one instruction. So the nice thing about one-on-one instruction is, since it's more of a conversation, I think you're a lot less likely to either become bored because I'm going a little too slow, or just be frustrated because you're not quite able to catch up and you don't maybe feel comfortable asking me to slow down. And in a conversation that's one-on-one, those two problems at least show up less often. Next, there's lots that you can do autonomously. Like I hope this class feels like it's empowering to you, like you can take charge of your own learning. And one small way you can do that is choosing how you learn your next topic. And one thing that can at least help with that, be a supplement, is the step-by-step procedures that you can get from that hint button. Now, another thing that can be really helpful, if you really want to feel like you have a good, real solid conceptual understanding, is the full lectures from Khan Academy. I've looked at a lot of these, and a lot of the time I'm just floored by the quality. Other times, I see something that could be done better, but I definitely think they're a great addition to the class. And they're only a click away, and I'm only a name away. Mr. Traxler. All right, what's something new? Personalized lessons. So these are mini, medium, and mighty lessons, as we see here. I think we're missing the medium size, but you can see, some things are bigger, some things are smaller. You're obviously going to get a little more credit for participating in a larger lesson, and that's one of your alternative ways, optional ways of getting credit. Usually optional. Okay, and it's going to be based on either the student needs or your interests. We'll talk about that more in a wee bit. I guess right now. Okay, so you can bring some insight and interests. Bring insight to your interests and previous math lessons in the following ways. So math can do a magnificent job of helping you better understand something that you might already be familiar with. So new perspectives on math ideas, a better understanding of a concept in science, maybe from Miss Drain's class, maybe not. You could answer a fundamental question, or you could just learn more about a hobby, and that maybe I choose a fundamental question from your hobby. So what is a fundamental question? Well, sometimes they're called basic questions. I like fundamental. So let's give some examples. Well, first, I'm going to give you a template so I know what fundamental questions you're interested in, so I know what interests you. So at the top of your card, you want to say your name. In my case, Mr. Traxler. You'll put a different name there if your name isn't Mr. Traxler, at least. Okay, so Your question might be, why is the sky blue? Well, we know it's not always blue, so we'll get a question of both of those. And what's interesting about a question like this is I might answer this question from a different, not better or worse, but a different perspective, depending on what math class you're in with me. So different math can actually answer different facets of a question. And each facet I think you'll find pretty interesting in a lot of cases. Now, how does gravity work, right? So something that a lot of us take for granted, sometimes even greatly annoyed by gravity. Plenty of us have felt that way before. Man, if there wasn't gravity here, how good would my life be? I could just float over that door. I wouldn't have to walk, man, get up. So get you some really cool insight into gravity and things related to gravity. Why does car insurance cost so much? So this is something that might be a little closer to home for some of you. Now, you might know, at least generally speaking, what a sonic book is and what causes it, but we're going to flesh it out a little bit, including looking at what exactly does it look like, either from the air in a three-dimensional way, or that yellow curve. What shape is that? Why is it that shape? Once again, which part of that question is probably going to depend on what math class you're in. All right, why can a Formula One car make such sharp turns at incredibly high speeds? Imagine that you're going to turn off the interstate, but you forgot to slow down. You decided, well, I'm just going to turn anyway. In most cars, that would just be disastrous. But somehow, that's absolutely no problem. That's a typical turn in Formula One racing, which is mind-blowing. So what innovations or what technology do they use to make that so that's even close to being possible? Why does Earth orbit the sun? So this actually is related to a previous question, but we're going to tackle it in definitely different ways. It's related to the gravity question. This is something that took humanity quite a few hundred years to figure out. For a while, we just thought things in space were going in circles, or that we were going, or the sun was going around us. And if you think about what it was like just trying to figure things out from standing on the ground, it's pretty reasonable that you might come to those conclusions about astral bodies. We'll look into the math that was used to figure out why that wasn't true, right? We knew that we orbited around the sun well before we were able to see it with our own eyes, well before we were actually spacebound. Now, why do some musical notes create harmony while others don't? That's right, we're going to study some music, and once again, this is a question that has some very interesting, some more interesting than the other, different answers depending on which math class you have with me. I imagine this will be of interest to a lot of them. One thing that's interesting is that it's almost like it turns out that some things are perfectly in harmony, while other things are almost in harmony, and it's almost like a mathematical coincidence that they'd be close. Sort of like the coincidence that I believe it's 24/7 is close to pi, but not quite. So that's the sort of thing you might be in store for there, but that is definitely not all. Okay, so I'm gonna need to know. There are some lessons I'm already going to make for you without you asking, but I definitely want some ideas. I want to get a sense of what fundamental questions and what interests you want answered. So you'll fill out this card. Maybe you're really ambitious. You know, just even if you only fill out one thing per section, that's totally okay. Maybe you're interested in basketball, track, you like the sports. Programming has tons of math that's at least can be embedded in it. You can take a break from math while doing programming too. Video games, all sorts of stuff we could go with there. I mean, whether it's video game development or just embedded in the game itself, there's math there. Music we mentioned. Now, art and especially finance have a lot of interesting math embedded in it. In fact, that was my specialty when I first entered college, was the finance of mathematics. Specifically, how did insurance companies decide how much to charge you? You might remember that was a question that you could ask that was on a previous slide. Pretty interesting question. Pretty good math there. All right, so now homework, you'll be glad to hear. Now, Khan Academy, you could treat as homework, but other homework lessons are entirely optional. Now, the nice thing about homework, though, is I think you'll find that it gives you quite a bit of credit for how much time it's likely to take you. So I think it's worth doing if you want to get better at that particular subject. So for each lesson, I'm going to provide a homework that can go along with it. So not only is it helping you get better at that math, which is then going to help you, be better at something you might be having some difficulty with in Khan Academy or want a better understanding of, but then that lesson can then help you with homework, which can get you even more credit, which we'll talk about credit a little later, or points we're going to call them. Now, one caveat here is, once again, remember, this class is about mastery learning. You've seen some of that when you've done Khan Academy already, which means that we're not going to settle for just sort of understanding it. So if you hand me something and it seems like about a C grade, then I'll probably hand it back to you and offer some help to you. So how can we improve it? How can we improve your understanding? And then you'll get credit for it once you feel like you bring that up to A, or at least close to A quality. All right, math points. That's how most of your grade is going to be calculated now. And it offers a lot of flexibility because there's a lot of ways you can choose to earn those math points. So one way is a way a lot of you have already taken a lot of advantage of and have already built up some math points for this semester. And that is working on Khan Academy. Every single, well, I'll go over a little more, but the participating lessons, working on Khan Academy, doing homework. All right, so now we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics. So every % you make in Khan Academy means another point. So how else do you make points? Well, through lessons and homeworks. A medium lesson or homework gets you 1/3 of a point. A little bit bigger, a medium lesson gets you 1/2 a point. And if you do a mighty lesson, that's worth an entire point, the same as a 1% completion. So you can kind of mix and match. Maybe one week you do more lessons, maybe fewer the next week. All right, so the rest of the grade is going to be based on mastery tests. Mastery tests are a little different from what your normal tests are. All right, and I think overall you'll consider them an improvement. So now, normally, you might not feel too comfortable with some of the questions on your tests, but from here, we don't let you take the test until Khan Academy says you've already mastered every question. The tests are really just there to make sure that Khan Academy was right about that assessment, or that you retained it okay since you mastered it. There's also going to be extra credit review problems from previous materials, and if you don't get that A, right, then there's going to be remediation help and remediation tests to help correct that. Remediation tests are going to be required, kind of like with the homeworks. If you don't quite get that A status, there's going to be tutoring, and I can even make an extra lesson for you if you don't make it. Let's say you get 5 out of 10 and plus 2 extra credit. So your score is then 2 skills away from an A. Then that just means 2 remediation tests, 2 times that we prepare you to do that kind of question 5 times in a row. And to get extra preparation, we can always do a remediation lesson, which means you've got extra time to work on a concept while you still make points. All right, hope you have a wonderful class.